Black Mirror, an anthology series giving us a dark reflection, hence the name of the show, of our current social, economic, and political landscape with depressing tales about love, technology, and how those collide. Many episodes of the show are some of my favorite films ever made for their out-of-this-world ambition and execution, but unfortunately, the show is not perfect, with some stinkers along the way. So, without further ado, here is my entire ranking of every Black Mirror episode. Disgusting! Holy shit, this episode is legitimately hilarious. Like, I had no idea that the same show that has given us mind-blowing masterpieces that push the envelope of storytelling in television could give us something on the same level as Wonder Woman 1984. From the laughably forced acting, to the weirdly jarring editing, to the dry direction, this episode just seems like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Let's start with the character decisions. Okay, I'm an incredibly edgy teenage boyfriend stereotype who does sex and cocaine with your daughter. And now that you found out and gave weird, vague threats saying to never talk to your daughter again, and your daughter finds me after I try to ghost her, I literally don't tell you about anything your mom said, and I just tell you to leave and that I don't like you. Okay, my mom has been overprotective my entire life and has been watching my every move since I was an infant, so when she makes me break up with my cliche emo teenage boyfriend and predicts that I am pregnant and sneaks abortion pills into my meals, which is, oh yeah, totally believable, do I A, have a justifiably angry conversation about her not controlling me, but not try to kill my mom because she is my mom, and I've known her to be a good mother my entire life? Or do I B, slam my door, have some alone time, but not fucking kill my mom because she is my mom and I've known her to be a good mother my entire life? Or do I C, I think you get the point. So the daughter attempts murder on her own mother after one big incident, and how does this episode end? With 5 minutes of useless footage of the daughter leaving her house and going out in the world. The editing definitely didn't do this one any favors either. There are several moments where I was wondering to myself, did my TV just lag? But nope, that was just the combination of two very distinctively different shots in a row for some inexplicable reason. The direction was dreadfully bland, with no color contrast whatsoever. Everything just looked vanilla. At times this episode is hilarious. At times, it is also very boring. But not a single time is it good, and for that, this is a 1 out of 10.
Are you werewolf?
You know, going into season 6, I was expecting garbage, given the majority of the reviews being pretty negative, and while I definitely wasn't totally right about it all being bad, I also would have never expected something as bad as this. The first minutes of this episode isn't too bad with some really sharp direction and lighting, but that twist was ass. I'm not going to spoil it, but I'll just say that it throws all pre-existing logic out the window and makes the episode feel more like a bad Blumhouse movie. Let's just get on to the next one, because Maisie Day is a chore to sit through and to talk about. 2 out of 10.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 best plot twists of the 21st century so far.
It's time to stop!
Black Mirror is a show that I rave over for just how meaningful most of its expeditions feel. This is one of the exceptions. Playtest is one of the only Black Mirror episodes that I think is complete and utter shit. And the main reason I hate it so much is the plot itself. There is no meaning to the episode. In my opinion, Playtest is an episode that caters to the people who love watching movies and TV shows that have a lot of shock value, and then they can sit back, think they just watched something deep, and give it a 10 out of 10. Now, of course, I'm not calling you stupid if you like this episode. That would be ridiculous. What I am saying, however, is that shock value is a value that lasts for a short amount of time and should not be the sole reason you like something. Another reason this episode sucks is because of the twists. I love a twist when it is done well, and trust me, we will get to that later on the list. But holy crap, there are like 3 twists in 2 minutes in this episode, and it just gets overbearing and repetitive. The first twist feels a little empty and boring, but then you get the second one, which is even worse, and then the third is just laughably over the top. And more than anything, I think the reason that these twists were used is to hide the fact that this episode is really half-baked and pretty uneventful. There is no progression or substantial change in anyone's life, and it kinda just leaves me feeling empty. The acting from the main character is absolutely dreadful. His snarky, carefree attitude comes off so forced due to a lack of expression whatsoever, and also due to the ridiculously predictable and boring dialogue. The story beats are also off, with this episode having like 4 parts, but 3 and 4 all happening in the last 5 minutes. 2 out of 10.
You can't keep getting away with it!
If one thing is made explicitly clear from the first episode of Season 6, Joan is Awful, it is that Black Mirror is attempting to take the best aspects from both of Black Mirror's notable eras. Its early, small-scale, twisty, and pretentious era, and its newer, self-aware, meta, and comedic era. And while on paper, that sounds like a great thing and a step in the right direction after the colossal fuck-up that was Season 5, it proves to be way overly ambitious. And for this episode specifically, you really have to suspend all disbelief for this straight-up ridiculous concept. The plot, to the acting, to the sometimes unbelievable character decisions, this episode will undoubtedly warrant some eye rolls from many casual viewers, and even the hardcore fans of the show. And while this episode may be a little hard to get into at first, the episode starts to get really compelling about halfway through. The problem I had with Season 5 of the show was that many plot points and decisions were stupid while the rest of the episode remained uninteresting and bland. However, this is not the same for this episode at all. Joan is Awful fully commits to its ridiculousness, and from that you get some pretty funny dialogue, and some moments that I cannot believe they were willing to commit to. But that's my problem with this episode. I can admire its ambition, and even laugh at the batshit insanity of the episode, but it's not a good episode of Black Mirror for a few reasons. First of all, for every out-of-pocket hilarious joke, there are at least 5 that do not land whatsoever and just feel like the show is being so meta that they expect the audience to laugh out loud in excitement. And while that may work for some, it really does not work for me. And going back to my point earlier on, while they obviously try to take the best aspects from the show and package it into this episode, they end up letting the worst aspects shine through just as bright. Remember the unfortunate, pretentious, and self-indulgent aspects of the first few seasons? Well, this episode is just as self-indulgent as the first few seasons, with its confident yet extremely annoying slippery slope of pretentious bullshit that has not the slightest concern for its viewers, possibly rolling their eyeballs out of their heads. Remember the repetitive meta concepts of Season 5? Well, God almighty, this is the most meta episode of Black Mirror we have ever gotten, which is not a good thing.
Who could afford a place like that? It's a TV show house. I mean, look at me. Michael Cera licensed his face.
Shut your fucking mouth!
The end result of this episode is something that never bores, but never really impresses, and just lives in a weird limbo state, where it is so obviously starving to leave a lasting impact on the viewer, yet the core emotion and humanity that makes so many Black Mirror episodes incredible is non-existent in Joan is Awful. So, it's not very good, but nothing about it can truly make it awful. 4 out of 10.
This makes me laugh, and laugh so hard.
The Waldo moment. This one really stinks. It's not that I don't like political satire in film, I definitely do, given the fact that I gave both Team America World Police and The Interview a 7 out of 10, even though they're not very good movies. But the Waldo moment, unfortunately, hinges on the vulgarity of this tiny cartoonish bear, because yes, I have also seen Ted. But yeah, this episode is just another case of Black Mirror copying previously successful ideas and making them so much more dull. Like, at least Ted was willing to go at least a little over the top sometimes, whereas this episode of Black Mirror just expects the audience to turn into that Leonardo DiCaprio meme just because the bear made an unfunny dick joke. Not a great episode. 4 out of 10.
This is insane. What the fuck kind of bug is that?
Okay, so whereas in the Waldo moment, there was clearly no attempt at making anything new or interesting, in this episode, it is clear that at least a little effort was put into it, just not that much. Because with good execution, this episode could have easily been one of Black Mirror's best. But it is definitely not that. Let's start with the acting, because that is really the main problem here. The supporting actress, Madeline Brewer, is absolutely dreadful in this episode. She has the unbearable cliche of the snarky and joking friend that eventually is revealed to be corrupt. And my god, her acting is cringeworthy. So much of her humor has just the worst timing and execution, and the expressions on her face are so unrealistic that it was almost laughable. The main character also wasn't doing a great job, just being the stereotypical guy who slowly realizes the true effects of war. But in this episode, it was executed in such an obvious way. Like, I get the subtext of countries showing the masses propaganda about how despicable every single one of their enemies are, even if they are innocent, but this was just so on the nose. The episode could have been at least okay, but as it is, this was an absolute cringe fest with some good ideas. 4 out of 10. You know when something so mind-bogglingly stupid happens in a movie or TV show that you violently shake your head? Well, that is exactly what this entire episode has me doing. There was so much bullshit in this episode that by the end I was genuinely happy that it was over because I knew whatever the next episode was, it would not be as ridiculously stupid as this one. The direction is fine, the editing is fine, and the acting is actually good, so why is this episode so bad? Well, that's because the plot is a dumpster fire inside of a train wreck. There are so many conveniently timed moments, like when Rachel's dad has been waiting for what seems like hours to see his daughter perform, and then he goes to hassle the janitor about fucking mousetraps. And uh-oh, that was exactly when her performance was. Wow, how interesting and compelling. The doll itself is just also really ridiculous. Why would the dolls even have entire copies of Ashley's mind in them, and just have a limiter to take out the cheeky and humorous parts? I don't know, man. The episode isn't even that bad because the cinematography is pretty stellar, and Miley Cyrus actually did a very good job at voice acting, but overall, this was just not my thing. The humorous, over-the-top Black Mirror episodes always come out being some of my least favorite, and this is no exception. 4 out of 10.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Crocodile is probably the most divisive episode of Black Mirror for one simple reason. It is probably the darkest the show has ever gone. And I usually love when Black Mirror goes dark, and a lot of people seem to love this episode, so why didn't I? Well, that's because the episode just feels half-baked. The reason I love the other really dark Black Mirror episodes is because they are usually backed up by strong acting and well-written characters that you can empathize with. But in this episode, you have no one to do that with. Everyone feels like a plot device for the maximum amount of trauma an episode of Black Mirror could cause, and we don't really know anything about any of the characters. The main character feels really unrealistic for killing all of these people, but maybe this would feel more realistic if we knew anything about her. This episode is just stripped of anything possibly funny or heartwarming, which just feels really repetitive to me. Again, I didn't hate it. The score was a huge standout for Black Mirror with its stress-inducing strings and twisted interpolations of happier songs. The plot was pretty compelling for a while before it started to feel like trauma porn. Yeah, I don't know. If there was some sort of balance achieved here, it could have been a compelling episode, but as it is, this is just slightly below average. 4 out of 10.
How do I lose?
Because I will beat your fucking dick into the ground all day long.
That's kind of gay, isn't it?
Striking Vipers is one of the Black Mirror episodes of all time. The direction is lifeless, the acting is unimpressive, and the plot is so bad. So the idea here is to create a tale of repressed homosexuality and insecurity about your identity, which isn't executed too poorly in this episode, and seems like it could be compelling. But the end result is Black Mirror, San Junipero, and Being John Malkovich hybrid that could not have come off any less interesting. Two gay characters have to discover their feelings for one another through simulated heterosex, because yes, I do remember the ending of Being John Malkovich. These characters waste their time in relationships that don't matter but are really seeking something more meaningful, because I also watched Black Mirror's highest rated episode of all time. Anyway, I just want to move on, because I am just as interested in talking about this episode as Black Mirror was in making Season 5 engaging in the slightest. 5 out of 10.
They want me to have sex with a pig.
Yes.
This was literally the last Black Mirror episode I had to watch for this ranking, and wow, what a shitty way to end it. This was coincidentally the first episode of the show, and it is pretty clear. There was no real point to the episode, and while you could argue that the message was all about how everyone thought that the kidnapper wanted a public statement, when all he really wanted was to ruin this guy's life, which he clearly did, but overall, this was just well-executed trash. The direction reminds me of Succession, which is the highest form of compliment. The acting was pretty solid from every actor, and there were quite a few, but those were just the technical aspects. At the core, this was just a pointless, tedious, repetitive, and boring plot that does not need to be made into any sort of film. 5 out of 10.
Lord have mercy, I'm about to bust.
Black Museum is a great example of Black Mirror's unfortunate copying of their earlier and more successful episodes. Yay! So this episode is split up into 3 stories that eventually come together by the end. And this worked so well in White Christmas, so why did it not work here? Well, there are a few possibilities. Could it be the fact that one of the stories could have been removed from the plot without changing anything? Or could it be the fact that said story was unabashed torture porn that would have fit better in a Saw film than a Black Mirror episode? Well, definitely both, but it's pretty clear to see that the biggest problem is the first story. The first story is trying to be a dark, bloody comedy, but ends up just being an uncomfortably weird situation that makes no sense, does not fit into the story, is terribly written and acted, and even has shitty lighting. Can you tell that I don't really like the first story? Remove that first story, and you have a solid, slightly cheesy episode that might have been a bit short, but definitely would have worked better than shoving this god-awful first story in. Anyway, that issue drags this possible 8 out of 10 into a 5 out of 10. Come on, guys, you're better than this.
Mark, are the allegations true that you were secretly a lizard? I'm gonna have to go with no on that.
Yup, the best episode in Season 5 is still only a 6 out of 10. But I think I do need to say that a 6 out of 10 is still an overall positive score, which means that I enjoyed it. It just wasn't that good. The acting, especially from Andrew Scott, was pretty great. He really showed that this crazy taxi driver could be more than just a stereotypical insane kidnapper. The story is good for the most part, but things really fall apart in the end, and it was really unsatisfying to see this guy go through so much effort just to talk to the CEO, and then we find out it's because he is sad about his wife's death that he caused. No matter how many times you have to suspend disbelief in technology in Black Mirror episodes, this is just simply not how people act, and I refuse to believe that it is. They were clearly going for something emotional in the end, but it really fell flat due to a subpar script. Again, there are some nice shots to appreciate, some strong acting, and even a few surprisingly great moments throughout the episode, but it could have been a lot better. 6 out of 10.
My dog stepped on a bee.
Hated in the Nation. This is probably the first spot on this list where I start to annoy some people. I'm sorry, but Hated in the Nation is easily Black Mirror's most forgettable episode. And my main reason for saying this is because it does not feel like a Black Mirror episode at all. It feels like a spy movie. The characters are all boring one-dimensional plot devices to serve one purpose, and they never feel like real people. And don't even get me started on the ending. It reminded me of the ending of Indiana Jones, which isn't a bad thing. Once again, it just doesn't feel right for Black Mirror. Most of the episode was pretty uninteresting because we don't know any of these characters, and overall, it could have been worse, but as it is, it really isn't that impressive, and it does not fit Black Mirror at all. 6 out of 10.
Baby, do you know what that's worth? Ooh, heaven is a place on earth.
Speaking of controversial placements, I am really not excited about being crucified for this one. This is one of the highest rated episodes of Black Mirror, and literally the highest on Letterboxd. And I think it's a bit overrated. I still enjoy it. The concept of this virtual city where you could spend many of your final days in is cool. The twist reveal was done in a very subtle way, and I can appreciate how upbeat and happy this one feels compared to many of Black Mirror's episodes. That said, I just do not feel like it is doing that much compared to the rest of Black Mirror's output. The acting is, not good. Kelly's character is fine. She isn't written in a very interesting way, but her acting was pretty good. Yorkie, however, played by Mackenzie Davis, was not executed well. She has a total of like 3 different faces in the episode. Her delivery is eye-roll worthy sometimes, and as a result, I was not as invested as I could have been in this story. Also, the plot is pretty lame. It feels very repetitive, and when you strip away all of the fancy technology being presented throughout the episode to keep it interesting, this is a pretty standard romance story. Overall, It is not my thing, and I'm glad so many other people like it, but I really just could not care at all about these characters. 6 out of 10.
I'll be right back, folks.
Be Right Back is one of the smaller scale episodes of Black Mirror, but that is what makes it so unique and charming. The episode was very short, and every second was utilized. The character development found in this episode is some of the best in Black Mirror's entire catalog, given that this episode is focused mainly on 2 characters. Really don't have a lot to say about this one. I think this episode is pretty good, but nothing about it really stuck with me, because I can point some fingers at things that it definitely derived from. Mainly her. 7 out of 10.
But again, I am the devil from the Bible, so I don't know how
You
well it's gonna work.
motherfucker, you didn't let me finish!
Well, it didn't take long to get to the other episode that does not feel at all like Black Mirror. Demon 79 is the only Black Mirror episode where technology is not heavily involved, and for that, I can't rank it too high, but I really did enjoy it. Honestly, this episode is really just the good version of Knock at the Cabin that came out earlier this year, so in a way, I wish that this wasn't Black Mirror and I just went to see this instead of the colossal fuck-up that is Knock at the Cabin. Demon 79 reminds me a little of Joan is Afraid with its ridiculous sense of humor, which still doesn't really hit for me, but there were a few loud nose breathes, which is all I can ask for out of Black Mirror, I guess. This episode is very stressful and entertaining, with some stellar direction from Toby Haynes, who has also directed USS Callister, that we will get to much higher on the list. 7 out of 10. And did I forget to mention that I wish this replaced Knock at the Cabin? Well, after what I said about San Junipero, it was pretty clear Hang the DJ wasn't going to be too much further. The same still applies for this episode. It's still a pretty average romance if you strip the fancy technology away, but there are 2 things that make this episode better than San Junipero. First, both lead performances are great and way more believable than San Junipero, and the characters are written in a less obvious way. Also, the concept of this one feels much stronger. The idea that for the 2 to match, they have to sacrifice everything else for each other, and that the whole episode takes place in the app's algorithm, holds together really well in my opinion, and also makes it feel like it has a point. 7 out of 10. Still not amazing, but this episode is quite a bit of fun.
Hey, how do you feel about the current socioeconomic climate in America?
I think hamburgers and cheeseburgers work well with fries.
Okay, so this might be another controversial spot on the list, and shout out to my basketball coach who said that this is his favorite episode. I can understand why. Nosedive has incredible set design, impassioned acting, a competent script, and plenty of hilarious satirical jokes, but my main problem with this episode is the plot itself. Peel back the layers, and for 30 minutes, this is just a road trip movie. Sure, during this journey to get to her popular friend's wedding, she learns that this popularity contest of a world is horrible, and it's better doing what you want alone than not doing what you want with other people, which is actually an amazing lesson. But so much of the timing with certain characters running into each other just feels a bit too convenient. But this stale road trip format was not even my biggest issue in the plot. That just has to go to the ending. Most of the characters feel like they are only there to bang us over the head with this on-the-nose message about social media being a bad popularity contest, and then 2 characters at the end are just screaming profanities at each other and it ends. Once again, I like it. I think that the idea of people rating every single interaction with one another is a sadly believable dystopian future. It's just that the over-the-top and obvious messaging, along with its sloppy ending, and a pretty boring road trip portion in the middle, make this a 7 out of 10 when it could have easily been in Black Mirror's top 5 episodes.
The NYPD's Technical Assistance Response Unit, yes, a robot dog that's hounding city streets.
Metalhead is, execution-wise, one of Black Mirror's strongest episodes to date. The gritty black and white atmosphere is executed perfectly by the director, who uses this fast-paced cinematography to convey tense scenes, and it works perfectly. It actually kind of reminds me of Mad Max Fury Road, which is another very high form of compliment. The robot murderous dogs are really cool and menacing, and actually terrifying, and it would really suck if they are actually being actively made right now and put on the US border. Overall, this episode is firing on all cylinders from a technical standpoint. For what they were going for, I don't see it getting much better than this. 7 out of 10.
We live in a society!
White Bear is one of Black Mirror's bleakest episodes, and I get why it's so popular. This idea of others suffering for entertainment, along with people forgetting that everyone is human no matter what they have done, are both well executed concepts as far as messaging goes, but the episode really didn't stick with me. The twist mostly works and has some really striking sound design and visuals through the reveal, but I just found it kind of hard to believe that everyone would go along with this, including, I don't know, the government. Putting someone in a never-ending loop where you have to forcibly make them forget the past every day is definitely some type of torture. And since the crime she committed of being an accomplice in a murder she was kind of forced into doesn't seem like the worst thing ever, I don't know if this would be allowed. But other than that, a very entertaining episode. I really liked how grimy they made the fake city look and feel. 7 out of 10.
If I can prove that I never touched my balls, will you promise not to tell another soul what you saw?
Another likely controversial placement on this list. I have seen quite a few Black Mirror rankings where this placed at number 1, and I simply just cannot understand that. The concept of this ability to rewind back in time to see your history through your point of view is cool and very well executed, but there are a few things holding this episode back for me. First off, the character development sucks. This is not the actor's fault. I think they all did a fantastic job. I just think that the script doesn't allow much time to flesh out these characters other than this character doesn't like this character very much. That's not a huge issue because fleshing out the characters was not the filmmaker's first priority here. I just can't really connect with these characters as they are right now. The ending, however, is my second flaw with the episode. Instead of giving us a conclusive and satisfying ending, or one that leaves it up for interpretation in a cool way, it kind of just fizzles out into the credits. It is clear what happened by the end, but there are so many extra and unnecessary shots near the end. Other than that, however, this was a really cool concept that was mostly executed well, with great acting, direction, and some ahead-of-their-time effects. 8 out of 10. This episode was fucking repulsive. 9 out of 10. The script of this episode is absolutely phenomenal. The scenes flow together so seamlessly in this episode due to an incredibly convincing performance given by Alex Lothar as Kenny. His dialogue and movements were presented with such emotion, and it is not surprising that he was such a standout here, given that he was also amazing in The End of the Fucking World, which I would highly suggest. The side characters in this one are all given a unique personality and feel like very fleshed out characters, even if they aren't the main focus. The foreshadowing in this episode is great. How you see little moments of Kenny's interaction with children that seem wholesome, but by the end, that same seemingly wholesome scene is disgusting. The dreary cinematography is very subtle, but all of the shots are so stark and vivid. Yeah, this one was phenomenal. Like I said, 9 out of 10.
I'm starting to get the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, I can't believe it either. Like I said, I did not have high hopes for season 6 of the show. I was expecting maybe a few okay episodes and quite a few bad ones, but holy shit, I was dead wrong. Loch Henry is amazing. At first, the episode plays out like an interesting but non-remarkable murder mystery, but once you see exactly what they were addressing by the end, it is just shocking that they were ever able to make this. The commentary on the exploitation of tragedy for content in the form of serial killer documentaries on Netflix, which, need I remind you, this show is on, and in the form of crime podcasts. The direction in this one is absolutely remarkable in the best way. The landscapes are beautiful, the darker scenes are portrayed in such a vivid way, and this episode really has a nice ending that at first seems like Black Mirror not being able to help itself and being unnecessarily meta, but by the end, you realize that the message was presented in such a memorable way by subverting the expectations of how this ending would usually play out. 9 out of 10.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
White Christmas is Black Mirror's best episode. That said, it's number 4. What? Objectively, this is Black Mirror's best, but number 3, 2, and 1 are my favorites, because this is my ranking of Black Mirror, and if I don't give those episodes the credit they deserve, who will? That said, let's talk about White Christmas. It probably goes without saying that on a scale of 1 to 10, this is like a 9 when it comes to fucked up Black Mirror episodes. The first story of this awkward dude trying to seduce an emo girl at a party turns into a dark and deeply depressing tale of miscommunication. She thinks that he is having the same crazy thoughts that she has just because he is talking to himself when he's really talking to his, Riz coach? Very strange job, but believable. Then we are shown how this new kitchen assistant works, where they take a part of you and put it into a tiny white object where your only task is to assist your human master. But the twist is that they take a literal living part of you and put it in that object. They lightly explore this concept of this insane isolation, which will be taken to even greater heights later in the episode. The second story is about a woman who gets pregnant by her current boyfriend, whom she has kind of lost interest in. What ensues is maybe the most heartbreaking story we have ever gotten from this show. Us seeing the lengths he is willing to go just to talk to her again, only to be blocked to the point where all she can see of him is a white blur. The tragedy that is formed from the ashes of this relationship seems like the high point of this episode, but it gets even better. The man that this deeply depressed and extremely confused person is pouring his heart out to was, just trying to get him to confess, and once he does, the man is stuck in the object for years, while his human form is still in his jail cell. And on top of this, John Hamm's character still has to be punished for his crimes regarding the first story, and in the end, he is blocked by everyone, seeing a white blob instead of any human being. This episode is incredible. The direction is impressive and vivid, the writing is believable and occasionally heart-wrenching, and the acting is some of the best Black Mirror has to offer. 10 out of 10. USS Callister is such an incredible achievement for so many reasons. The fact that they were able to pull off a twist/reveal very shortly into the episode, but do it in such a way where there is still much more to find out, unlike San Junipero, is impressive, given that this only came out a year later after that episode. The fact that this episode effectively balances repulsive and fucked up moments with great humor, and the fact that every actor is giving us their all, even though there are way more actors than usual for the show, it is all just spectacular. The episode is full of witty references to Star Trek and other fun space adventure films, and comical yet believable character actions that make it so much fun while still maintaining the usual concern for humanity that Black Mirror so often brings to the table. The acting from Jesse Plemons is perfectly creepy. Kristen Milioti has great comedic timing, which is no surprise given her performance in Palm Springs. It really just seems like all the stars align for this one, and this is, of course, a perfect 10 out of 10.
Britain's Got Talent returns, coming soon to ITV1 and ITVX.
So this was unexpected. I had watched every single episode of Black Mirror except for the national anthem and 50 Million Merits, which I know people liked, but I haven't really seen anyone love it, so I was pretty sure it was just going to be a pretty average episode of Black Mirror. I would write a bit about it, give it a 7 out of 10, and move on. But I was dead wrong. This is easily one of the best episodes, and it was actually one of their first. The concept of this dystopian society that has the vast majority of the population use a Peloton to obtain currency seems a little far-fetched, but once we are introduced to the class levels in this episode, it becomes pretty clear that this could really happen. The messaging on consumption is arguably a little on the nose sometimes, which is why it isn't number one, but that is literally the only complaint I have for this one. The score is incredible and feels like Paul Thomas Anderson's score, which, by the way, is very high praise. The acting from Daniel Kaluuya is maybe my favorite performance this entire show has to offer. His naive but determined character is portrayed in such a believable and relatable way that nothing in this episode feels ridiculous, and his ending monologue is insane. There are several hilarious moments in the show due to the fantastic delivery and comedic timing from the judges and many of the Peloton workers. The world building is so vivid and imaginative, the script is perfect, not a second of screen time is wasted. This isn't easy. 10 out of 10. Yeah. This will probably take some explaining. Like I said, I went into Black Mirror's newest season with very low expectations, and while 2 of those episodes met and were probably even worse than I was expecting, 2 of them were great, and one of them is my favorite Black Mirror episodes I've ever seen. Now I'll address the elephant in the room. A huge criticism I keep seeing online for Beyond the Sea is this. Why could you not have the clones be sent into space, and then none of these terrible things would have happened? Let me throw out a few things wrong with that criticism. First off, although we are never told what the space mission is explicitly, we can easily infer, due to several people recognizing the clones, that the space mission is incredibly well known and important. And if something went wrong with the clones, they can still complete their mission. But if they sent the clones to space, the mission would be a failure as soon as the clones malfunctioned. Second, the clones are not necessary on the mission. The clones serve as a consolation so that the characters can still enjoy their life on Earth. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about why this is number 1. First, I would like to say that the acting from Kate Mara, Josh Hartnett, and Aaron Paul is incredibly well done. But Aaron Paul absolutely steals the show. It is such a shame that this is the only big role he has gotten since Breaking Bad and the Breaking Bad spin-off movie, because he is such a convincing actor. And although Jesse is the only character I have ever seen him play before, I never once thought he was acting like Jesse throughout the entire episode. The range of emotion that Cliff has to display during this episode is absolutely hard to pull off, and yet he does. The plot of this episode is also totally up my alley. The complete internal chaos of all these characters, while the outside world doesn't know, makes this episode all the more heart-wrenching. While they can still go back to Earth throughout the episode, they are still secluded in this farm in the middle of nowhere, which makes the episode feel so much more stressful and isolating. While you could say that David's character goes over the top at the end, it's simply the feeling of isolation that has made him insane. While the act he commits at the end is without a doubt morally depraved and ridiculous, he needed a change, and since things weren't going the way he wanted, he changed them. The ending is maybe my favorite ending in any of these episodes, with Cliff coming back to see David waiting for him and pulling up a chair. David gives Cliff such a twisted choice by the end. Either finish the incredibly long mission with someone who used to be one of your best friends, but now is someone that you probably never want to see again once you got back, or fight and possibly kill David, but as it was stated, this is a two-man mission, and it would be suicide no matter who dies first. An episode so bleak and twisted, it could have only come from Black Mirror, the best anthology series of all time. 10 out of 10. Well, that was my Black Mirror ranking. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing. More content like this is on the way. Thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.